Hi, in this lecture we are going to be looking at Chapter 4, Music and Opera, but basically just music. We will skip the opera section. Now this lecture is going to be different than a lot of the other lectures we've been doing because we're going to talk more about what music does, experiences of music, and how it affects us, more music appreciation. Now, the chapter is, I still want you to read the chapter, and there's a lot of terms in the chapter. We will go over some of them near the end of this lecture. But again, this one's going to be a little bit different. I want you to think more about what music does and how it influences us and even influences how we view the world. Now, in this, you're going to have to do, unfortunately, I cannot get the YouTube clips to play while I'm recording the lecture. So there are various YouTube clips throughout this. I will ask you to go to listen to them. Some are meant to purely illustrate. Others, I want you to do something with them. So please take the time and do this. And it's going to begin with the first one we see right here. So what I want you to do with this, when you click on it, it'll take you to the YouTube video. There's a commercial, you can skip it. And then all I want you to do is have a piece of paper in front of you and label it 1 to 20. And then this is what's called Kick-Ass Classical. And what it's going to play is about 5 to 10 second little snippets of classical music. People tend to think when we say classical music, a lot of times you're like, oh, I don't know anything about that. All I want you to do is as you listen to this, have this playing and put your monitor away from you. Don't look at the screen, just listen. And all you need to do is just put a check mark if you've heard that music before. And then maybe a little note of where you've heard it, a parade, in a musical, in a movie. And then only do that for the first 20. There's actually 100 clips on here, but do it for the first 20. And then when you're done, go back, restart the video, and then look at which ones you actually know and where you've seen them before. So please start with that. All right. Well, then after you complete that, we're going to talk about music. Now, music is unlike the different forms of art that we have already studied. Why? Because when we look at a painting, we can usually see an entire painting at one time. Sculpture, a lot of times we can see it in one experience. However, music cannot be experienced all at once. It is temporal, meaning it happens over time. If we experienced music all in one moment, all the notes would just be boom, right at one. And then what we need to do is we want to think about what music does. Okay? All music comprises rhythm and melodies, yet they differ in how these are put together. Music is free from physical constraints, meaning it does not have literal mass. However, a live performance is fleeting. It only lasts a certain amount of time. And think about this. Each time we see something live, it's almost always different. Think about if you've been to a concert and you've seen the same person in concert time and time again. Each time you go, it is different. All right, other things I want you to think about. Why do we listen to music? What does music do? And you can see on the slide here's some different ideas. It can help set an atmosphere. It can signify a time or a place. It can add emotion or meaning or direction. Think about in movies. Why are there music in movies? Usually it has nothing to do with the plot line. It's there to help the viewer feel or understand certain emotions and elements. It can help create drama and tension in a work. It can add a rhythm to encourage a physical response. And then it can add texture or color within a work. And it also can ground the listener in a particular type of reality. And that's what we're going to play with the next couple of slides. So what I want you to do is click on the YouTube video here and maybe try not to look at the screen. Just listen to the music and think about what is it encouraging you to do? What do you feel like doing after you've listened to this? All right. Also, setting an atmosphere. Music can set an atmosphere. It can place us in time and place. I mean, think about something as simple as this. Why, before sporting events, do we play the national anthem? Well, think about it. The idea of this is that it's supposed to help people, everyone in the stadium, in the arena, feel connected, feel like they are coming together as one. And that's actually interesting for that in our current era, that's why people are protesting during the national anthem, because it's literally a statement saying that certain people, certain groups are feeling left out, that they are not part of this general American population. So it's a very powerful form of a peaceful protest. Now, other things with setting an atmosphere. Again, if you would, click on the YouTube link here and just listen for a few minutes. Usually, if this was in class, I wouldn't let you see the screen and I'd have you figure out when this was. Obviously, because of our media, that is not possible. But listen to, it's at least the first 3 minutes. And close your eyes and just listen to the music and think about what scene is being set. Okay, hopefully you have listened to it. And what this is actually that opening music to the original Jurassic Park film. So this is where they're in the helicopter and they're flying across the water to the island. And then where we hear the music kind of crescendo, it comes up. That's when we first see those dinosaurs. So if you listen to it, right, it starts very soft and low and slow, and then it builds and it builds and it builds. So it actually builds our expectations. Also, very famous clip here. Go ahead and play this YouTube video. And now, think about what did that music do? This is obviously from Jaws, and this is that moment where the swimmer is in the water and we know the shark is approaching, right? I mean, think about that. 2 notes, da-da. Think about how much influence that has over the film. It makes the viewer know, okay, we're not just watching somebody swim, we know something bad's going to happen. Imagine you're out in the woods or you're in the water swimming and you hear that music, what are you probably going to do? You're probably going to get the heck out of the water, right? Because we know because of it, something bad's going to happen. And so it helps set this expectation, and the music directs our emotion. It directs our attention. Think about in any sad movie ever. What type of music is playing when a character dies? Or think about a battle scene that is going on. Usually we have music playing with lots of dynamics, lots of shift in the dynamics in the work. And so all of that is done to help convey this information to the viewer. Now, interestingly enough, we have what's called meta commentary. And here's a couple terms I want you to know that are not in the textbook. And these are looking at our expectations. We have what's called the diegetic or the non-diegetic. So diegetic is what's natural. It's the sound that is implied by the action. So for example, if I had a gun in a movie and I fired it, the diegetic would be you would expect to hear the sound of a gun going off. Well, the non-diegetic means that this is something that the characters, it's either unnatural or the characters themselves would not hear, right? They would not be part of a production. So think about most movies. The clip you're going to watch here is from Blazing Saddles. So usually when we have characters doing something in a movie and there's background music going on, we call it background with the idea that the characters actually aren't hearing the music. They don't know it's part of it. And that would be the non-diegetic, that it's not something the characters would hear. And so I want you to watch this clip from Mel Brooks' Blazing Saddles. And what we're going to see the man riding his horse coming into town. And we're going to hear, okay, the music's playing in the background, so this is the non-diegetic, right? The character doesn't hear it. Well, then they funnily do. There's a little bit of a switch. So watch this and you'll see where the non-diegetic becomes the diegetic. All right, also very interesting is the use of silence and what silence can do to a work. The clip I have you watching here, this is just a short clip from the Makai Takashi's film Audition from 1999. And think about how silence is used in this to create suspense, to further the plot, and again to create the atmosphere. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this film, what happens is a man is actually looking for a new wife, and he's actually kind of auditioning these new wives. He finds a woman, and he likes her, but what he doesn't know, and the viewer does, is she's basically a psychopath. And that she, I won't tell you anything else, but just watch this little clip and then think about how silence is being used to add that atmosphere. All right. Well, in this section, what we're going to do is we're going to start looking at some of the elements of sound. These are some of the terms that are covered in your text. Some I'll talk about a little, but for the most part, I'm going to skim through these or just let you read the slides themselves, especially the later ones. Again, this is just meant to supplement the readings. All right. So first, we're going to talk about pitch. Now, pitch, what we're talking about, pitch is the relative highness or lowness of a sound. Even before that, sound is anything that excites the auditory nerve, meaning it's the physical, when we physically, it's physically excited, it vibrates, stir up on the anvil, and blah, 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 and that makes a sound that most humans can hear. So pitch, again, is the relative highness or lowness of a sound. Pitch has a steady, constant frequency. The faster the frequency, the higher the pitch. And so what's interesting and what we're going to talk about with pitch is it's going to kind of relate to what we've been talking about with setting atmosphere. So think about this. When we think about characters in a movie, think about the villain. The villain almost always has the lower voice. Usually it's a baritone or a bass. And then your hero, right, is usually more of a tenor. So it's a little bit higher. Still deeper than a female's voice, but usually it's a little bit higher. Why? Because when we hear that low voice, we automatically know it's the villain. Now think about this. An example of this, when we have the extremely low voice, it could be the exact opposite. It's either the villain or it's the high authority figure. A clear example of that is the voice of James Earl Jones. Very famously, right, he was the voice of Darth Vader in Star Wars, the example of the villain. Yet also in the movie The Lion King, he was the voice of Mufasa, the king. Now, what I want you to do is play the first clip here. And what you're going to see here is that being shown, that the villain has the lower voice, and then the hero, which is going to be Simba, has a little bit of a higher voice. Now, this is also true for females. Usually, the soprano is our hero, which is the soprano is the higher, and the female villain is usually a lower toned female voice, usually an alto. Now, that is usually the case unless it's done very intentionally where these things are switched. So an example of this, if you've ever seen the musical Wicked. Here, Wicked is the story, the true story of the Wicked Witch of the West. Now, we all know the Wicked Witch of the West, originally from The Wizard of Oz, she was our villain. But what happens in Wicked is we actually see the behind the scenes, the why she was, what happened and why she became what she became. And we see that, she's actually not the villain. Yet the two main characters, Glinda the Good Witch and then Elzeba, who becomes the Wicked Witch of the West, Glinda is the soprano. She has the higher voice. And Elzeba is the villain, right? She has the lower voice. Well, what we find out through this is actually we all had a misconception that in fact that Elzeba is not a villain. And so this whole tale is actually turning the story on its head, and that's what it also does with the different tones of the voices. Now, also interestingly enough, when we think of sidekicks and characters, they usually have, again, higher voices, male characters, higher voices than the villain, yet lower than the, sometimes lower than the hero. Now, between the sidekicks, the one that's kind of the bumbling idiot is also usually a lower voice. And that's our lower pitch, and that's where the second clip comes in here. Play this clip and pay attention to the voices that are used. Okay, now we're going to quickly go through some other terminology. Some I will have clips that I'd like you to listen to for examples. And again, this part is just meant to be supplemental to your readings. All right, some other definitions. Tone. Tone is a sound with a definite pitch. Scale is an arrangement of pitches played in ascending or descending order. An interval is the distance between any two pitches. And then we have the major scale, which is the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Now here, talking again about pitch, an example I have for you is the aria from The Magic Flute by Wolfgang Mozart. And what I want you to listen to is to listen to this. This is one of the most technically difficult pieces to do, and it is a very, very high pitch. All right, next we're going to talk about dynamics. Dynamics are the degree of loudness or softness in a work. They are measured in decibels, and you can see from the chart I have on the second page that we have different tones for them. You do not need to know all of these. Just a couple I'd like you to know is piano actually means soft, and forte is loud. And what I want you to listen to is we've talked about how, the music can help create the scenes, and the shift in dynamics can drastically change how we feel and view about a work. And that's where I want you to watch the clip here. This is O Fortuna by Carl Orff. And a lot of you are probably going to recognize this because it has been used in many, many movies, especially when we're looking at fight scenes. All right, the next is what's called tone color or timbre. And this is how we as humans tend to compare pitch played on different instruments. We tend to assign them a certain color. And usually an experiment I would have you do if we were in class is usually you would have paints or colored pencils, and you would play these different clips and you would just kind of create whatever you wanted. What's interesting is there tends to be common themes, that when there's slower, lower pitched music, we tend to associate it more with sadness. Lots of dark browns, blues, and grays are used. And then pieces that are quicker and lighter notes, we tend to use brighter, happier colors, and drawings tend to be things like flowers and bees and things that are happier. And it's very interesting because naturally as humans we tend to associate this. So if you'd like, I've put in different clips on here. Please watch the first one. It's a very short clip and it kind of shows the tone color matched up with the piano keys. And then the other ones you can have some sort of paint or crayons or colored pencils in front of you and just kind of draw whatever comes to your mind. And it'd be interesting to see if they actually meet the examples I've said. All right, duration, this is how long a note lasts. The length of vibration continues without interruption. And you can read some of the different terms I have for you here. All right, again, these are just different terms for you. Rhythm is the recurring pulses and accents that create identifiable patterns. I'm going to breeze through these next few slides. Some I might not even talk about, so please pause and read the slides. All right, meter is a cluster of beats, and it's set by the time signature. Tempo, basically it's how fast or slow a work goes. It's the rate of speed of composition. And we've already talked about how this can influence a work. Again, I've given you a list of terms and signs. You do not need to know all of these. Well, you don't need to know them. They're just here for your reference. All right, and then melody. It's a musical line. A musical line is a set combination of sound and rhythm, or the way sound transitions from one note or notes to the next. Melody is a succession of sounds with rhythmic and tonal organization. And then the melody line or the melodic line is the main focus of a work. Now within the melody we have major and minor modes or keys. And the key signature is symbolized by the number of sharps or flats seen on the left side of a bar of a musical score. Now what's interesting is if something is in the key, the major key, usually it's associated with happier tones, and minor keys are associated with sadder tones. So please play the YouTube clip here. It's just a short, funny little cartoon, but it helps you see the difference between the major keys and the minor keys. All right, now your textbook does go through the different harmonic lines. Voices is just another term for musical line. The melodic line, like I already said, is the main focus of the music that's heard in succession. So you again can read these on your own. All right, within melody, excuse me, we have what's called dissonant or dissonant tones, and these are sounds that are unstable, and they usually are associated with being disagreeable. You'll see when we talk about in the next history chapter, when we get to modernism and this idea of making it new and rejecting this idea of structured art, you're going to see a lot more or hear a lot more dissonant works. Why? Because they're challenging how and why music is used. Now we have consonant tones, and these are sounds that are stable, and usually this is associated with being pleasant. All right, textures within a work. This is the relationship between the melodic and harmonic lines. And this is looking at how melodic lines are used within the work and how we can have some denser musical works, which means that it's the layering of different musical components.